The Project Japan.
Higashiyama Kyoto, an internationally renowned tourist destination. With Kiyomizu-dera Temple, Kodaiji Temple, Ninezaka Street, and numerous other sites where visitors can experience traditional Japanese culture, it draws crowds of foreign tourists. Lining its streets are numerous historical buildings, many centuries old. There are now moves to better preserve and utilize them to both keep local culture alive and generate new value for the local community. We spoke with Professor Mitsuo Takada, who researches the preservation of historical architecture.
Old buildings certainly have value, and naturally, there's significance in preserving them. But my focus goes beyond that, to the sustainability and value of buildings that have lived through the history of ever-changing sensibilities. These buildings are also where people have lived, and preserving the culture of everyday life that's been passed down will in turn lead to architectural preservation.
October 2019. At the foot of Higashiyama Hill with a sweeping view of the ancient capital's townscape, Kyoyamato, a long-standing traditional restaurant founded 142 years ago, reopened its doors after a massive restoration. And on its grounds is a new international luxury hotel, Park Hyatt Kyoto. The idea of blending traditional Kyoto culture with a world-renowned hotel has generated widespread interest. The project was developed by Takenaka Corporation. Central to this initiative was a certain concept.
We wanted to design and develop a hotel to show a new type of Kyoto. Our theme was New Kyoto.
Kyoyamato opened its restaurant here in 1949. Some of the wooden structures have stood here since the Edo period, centuries ago. At the end of the Edo period, in the mid-1800s, imperial loyalists, such as Katsura Kogoro, are said to have held meetings here. Today, the buildings are designated historical architectural landmarks by the city of Kyoto. We asked the seventh-generation owner, Junko Sakaguchi, about their condition before the restoration.
The buildings were over 150 years old, and you could tell just by looking at them that some were tilted. And whenever there was heavy rain, water would leak into the backyard.
She says the wear and damage progressed over the decades.
They're in my care, but you could say they're the property of Kyoto, of Japan, and also a cultural heritage. So my wish was that they be preserved in their original state as much as possible.
Her hope is to pass on the attractions of this historical location to the next generation. In response, Takenaka Corporation proposed keeping the old buildings in place while bringing in a luxury hotel to the property.
They proposed keeping the structures intact and building a hotel to coexist with them. They also said they would preserve the garden and the view. I thought it was a wonderful proposal.
Takenaka's plan was to have the restaurant not inside the hotel but operated independently, with both coexisting in the same space. What was the purpose?
Kyoto itself is a place abounding in an enterprising spirit and continually giving birth to new companies. Our aim was to build a hotel integrating the old with the new.
Their concept is New Kyoto. The biggest feature of this project was blending the cultures of these two prestigious establishments. And further afield, their vision extends to business continuity.
We believe the business of Kyoto's traditional restaurants and the continuity of that culture is entering a period of transition. The business model we proposed offers one solution to that issue.
The collaboration with the international hotel operator has brought changes to Kyoyamato itself.
About 90% of our individual customers are from Japan, and we didn't receive many people from overseas. But now the hotel has been built next door. As they're a global brand, we've been welcoming people from around the world.
Hyatt has become the restaurant's new partner. The opening of their flagship brand, Park Hyatt, is the second in Japan and the first in 25 years. What do they hope to achieve through this project?
I believe that Higashiyama synchronizes with Park Hyatt as a global brand. Our guests who stay here choose us for location, but also through storytelling. Guests, international travelers that come to Kyoto, particularly in the luxury market, want to have a real connection with the sense of place. Kyoyamato provides that for our property.
Since the start of the project, all the parties held repeated discussions on how to carry out their collaboration.
Park Hyatt is the flagship of the Hyatt Group. And truth be told, the requests we made to them were quite demanding in terms of integrating the different business models. Initially, there were doubts about whether it was really possible. In that respect, the Hyatt Group responded thoroughly and flexibly in matching the standard of their brand to the concept of protecting the history of Kyoyamato.
The merger of the two cultures of a traditional Japanese restaurant and an international hotel has generated a synergy that leverages the strengths of each partner.
Furthermore, we look to do more collaborations with Kyoyamato and enhance the options and experiences our guests have within the property.
One theme was central to the project: how to best harmonize the building with Kyoto's townscape.
It's the scenery of Higashiyama. We felt strongly that we wanted to connect this to the future.
Tomoyuki Shirahase was in charge of the design.
We wanted to create a scenery of these characteristic tile roofs overlapping and blending into the townscape, what you could call a cluster of tiled roofs. So we focused on obscuring the boundaries of the property and making this place visible as one part of the scenery found here.
The construction site is in a district with a townscape ordinance that strictly regulates the height and area of buildings. For that reason, they took measures to embed about 60% of these buildings underground.
At this property, there's an approximately 28-meter height difference between the lowest and highest points. Most people aren't aware, but some parts of the garden they see are actually in the roofs of the buildings.
Takenaka took advantage of this difference in elevation and intricately positioned the gardens and buildings.
What we focused on the most was the relationship between the new buildings and the original traditional buildings to mutually create a foreground via the garden, with the townscape of the old capital as the background.
This is a technique utilized from long ago called borrowed scenery. The gardens and buildings on the property merge with the scenery beyond, creating one single picture.
When you see the scenery, there's a richness that comes from how the passage of time overlaps over the generations. That was our vision.
And their most important mission was the preservation of historical architecture.
The building you see over there, called Soyote, had very severe damage to its foundation, so we employed a method of hoisting the entire building and temporarily moving it to another location, rebuilding the foundation, and then hoisting it up again and returning it to its original site.
In renovating the buildings, they also applied traditional construction methods.
We used a method called column underpinning, which is also used in Sukiya-zukuri architecture. In reinforcing the walls, we focused on reusing original materials, such as remixing the mud plaster that's used.
During construction, there was an unexpected episode.
This area is inhabited by forest green tree frogs, which are designated natural treasures, and during construction we had to remove all the water. So for that period, the frogs were kept at Takenaka's site offices. They said they cared for the frogs like their parents.
This project was aimed at protecting local culture while creating new value.
One of our big missions is to preserve old and astounding buildings for future generations. And with these flagship type of buildings bringing in more guests, we believe we were able to contribute to the local community.
Their ultimate goal is to build a new Kyoto. This challenge offers hints for future town planning initiatives.
In making something new, we want to continue thinking about how to create a harmony with the wonderful things that are already there and how to coexist with them.
You could say traditional Japanese restaurants are a space for comprehensive arts, naturally cuisine, but also the dishware, the interior, the architecture, and the gardens. I believe various aspects have cultural value and hope guests will be able to enjoy them.
We continue to look to do more, unique and new experiences, whilst maintaining traditions within this very unique location that we are built on.
If I had to describe Kyoto culture, I would say it's the coexistence of diverse values. Within the scope of certain rules, efforts are made so that different values can coexist as towns are maintained. I believe it's essential to realize the concept of cultural sustainability.
Japan is aiming to become a top tourist destination. How can historical resources be effectively utilized? New technologies and ideas may point the way forward.